Okay, so imagine you're looking at, I don't know, a cat or a tree or even like just a simple paperclip. And you kind of have this feeling of like, what makes it that thing, right? What makes it that thing and not something else? What is that like core?
Yeah.
That fundamental essence. That's kind of the question that we're going to be tackling today. This idea of what really defines the things around us, which is something that John Locke really gets into.
He does, yeah.
In his philosophy.
Absolutely. It's key
though
to understanding his, especially the later books of the essay concerning human understanding.
Right.
Books 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Really this concept of real essence is crucial.
So that's what we're doing today in our deep dive. We're going to unpack real essence.
Yeah.
And kind of see the different interpretations of it and why it's still important, today.
Well, yeah, because, I mean, the question of real essence
Right.
really feeds into debates about natural kind realism.
Right.
The question of whether there are genuine kinds in nature.
Yeah, exactly.
So it has live implications for contemporary philosophy.
Okay, so to start off, maybe we can talk about the distinction that Locke makes between what he calls the real essence and the nominal essence. So real essence, as he's talking about it, when we're talking about physical substances, which is kind of our focus today, is like the thing that is the underlying cause of the observable qualities of a thing.
It's that fundamental underlying structure.
Yeah, like the hidden structure.
Yeah.
If you will.
You can think about it as the internal machinery of the constitution of its parts that is responsible for its properties and how it interacts with the world.
And then we've got the nominal essence, which is more about the human concepts and language that we bring to these things.
As how we categorize things.
Right, based on...
It's the abstract idea we form based on the qualities we observe, things have in common. And then we use that to sort of group things into species or genera.
Sure, right. So our definition of a cat would be the nominal essence.
Right.
Like furry, four-legged meows.
Right. Exactly, yeah. That's the nominal essence.
Yeah, so we were talking about penguins earlier. So penguin, like black and white, flightless, waterfowl.
Short, kind of stubby.
Short, stubby, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's
the nominal essence.
That's the nominal essence.
Right. Yeah.
So what's interesting about Locke's distinction here is he's saying that what we think makes a penguin,
right,
which is that description, isn't necessarily what actually makes a penguin,
right,
at a deeper level.
Yeah, and what's really interesting too is Locke says we don't really have access.
We don't have access
to that real essence. Like we can see the penguin, you know, but
I see the color. Yeah. We see the distinctive gait.
Yeah.
But the underlying arrangement of particles, that's responsible for that. We don't see that.
And so when we use the term penguin, we're actually referring to that nominal essence.
To the nominal essence, right?
And not the real essence.
That's right. Yeah.
And so this has, all these implications for knowledge. And in book 4, Locke really kind of gets into that.
Yeah.
He's saying that for our knowledge to be real knowledge, our ideas have to correspond appropriately to these archetypes.
That's right. Yeah.
To what truly exists.
That's the real thing.
Yeah. So in science, he thinks that real scientific knowledge would occur if our nominal essences, our idea of the nominal essence, perfectly mirrored the real essence.
That's right, yeah.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because he argues that does happen in some cases, like mathematics and morality.
Yeah, so when a mathematician defines a circle, or when a moralist defines justice, that definition, that nominal essence, fully captures the nature of the thing. There's no hidden underlying structure.
Right.
That's separate from the definition itself.
Right. So for those things, it's like a human science of those concepts is possible. But when it comes to substances, it's a totally different story.
It's a different story because for Locke, those are always distinct and separate.
Right.
The real essence and the nominal essence.
Right. So we can never have perfect scientific knowledge about a penguin or a piece of gold.
Yeah.
In the same way that we can about
a triangle.
Yeah.
Right. Because we don't have access to that fundamental what it is to be a penguin or what it is to be gold.
Yeah.
So it's a real limitation on science. that Locke is emphasizing.
Okay, so that really kind of sets the stage.
Yeah.
So what did Locke actually mean by real essence?
Yeah.
Like, what is this thing, and how did it fit into his bigger philosophical project?
To get a clearer picture, we should actually look at how Locke defines these things.
Right.
So in an essay concerning human understanding, Book 3, Chapter 3, Section 15, Locke writes, and I'm going to quote him here.
Okay.
He says, first, essence may be taken for the very being of anything, whereby it is what it is. And thus, the real internal, but generally in substances, unknown constitution of things, whereon their discoverable qualities depend, may be called their essence.
Okay, so real essence is really about that fundamental being, that hidden internal structure. Yeah, and then he goes on to contrast that with the nominal essence.
Right.
So he says...
What does he say about nominal essence? Secondly, it being evident that things are ranked under names into sorts or species, only as they agree to certain abstract ideas to which we have annexed those names, the essence of each genus or sort comes to be nothing but that abstract idea, which the general or sortal name stands for. These two sorts of essences, I suppose, may not unfitly be termed, the one the real, the other the nominal essence.
So that's really about our ideas and our...
We use language.
Yeah,
to sort things.
Right. So the real essence causes those qualities that we see, the color, the texture, whatever. And then the nominal essence is the abstract idea that defines it.
Right.
Yeah.
And here we should sort of think about what Locke means when he talks about these qualities. You know, he categorizes them in different ways. Right. And this really reflects the science of his time, the mechanical philosophy.
So let's get into those categories. So we've got primary qualities.
Right.
Those are the ones that are like inherent to the object.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, like,
no matter how you look at it,
how we perceive them.
Yeah.
They're just there.
They're in the object itself.
Right.
So think about solidity. Its resistance to being compressed.
Right.
Extension.
Right.
Its size and shape, figure.
Right.
Whether it's in motion or at rest, number of parts, its situation relative to other things.
Okay, and then we have the secondary qualities, which are more about how we perceive the object.
Yeah, so these are things like colors, sounds, smells, tastes.
Right, so the redness of an apple isn't actually in the apple.
No, it's not in the apple.
That's how we...
In the same way that its roundness is.
Right.
It's the power that the apple has by virtue of its primary qualities.
Right.
To produce that idea of red in us.
In our minds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so then what about tertiary qualities? So tertiary qualities...
How do those fit in?
Are the powers that an object has, again, by virtue of its primary qualities, to cause observable changes in other bodies.
Right.
So the classic example is the sun's power to melt wax.
Right.
The sun isn't changing in the process, but it's causing a change in the wax.
Right. Okay, so how do all of these different qualities fit in with nominal essence?
Okay, so when we form a nominal essence, what we're doing is we're taking, we're selecting a collection of these qualities, primary, secondary, tertiary.
Right.
And
they consistently appear together.
They appear together in a certain kind of substance.
Right.
And then we use those as a definition for that species or genus.
So gold, for instance, we define it by its yellowish color.
Right. Its density, its malleability, its ability to dissolve in aqua regia, but not sulfuric acid.
Yes.
So all of these properties we associate with gold. That's what makes up the nominal essence of gold.
Yeah.
And that's how we know if something is gold or not.
Yeah. So it's really interesting because it really emphasizes this, like, human understanding of the...
Because we're deciding what to include in the definition.
Yeah. So Locke says that species are the workmanship.
Of the understanding.
Of the understanding.
Yeah.
So nature presents us with all these things that share these similarities.
Yeah.
But it's really us.
Oh, right.
That does the sorting, and we decide what goes where.
And I think, and this is important too, Locke is not just talking about biological species here.
Right.
He's talking about natural kinds generally.
Yes.
So gold is just as much a species as a human is.
Right.
Gold is a species of metal in the same way that human is a species of animal.
Right. Okay. So let's contrast this nominal essence with real essence.
Okay.
So this is that...
Yeah, the very being of the thing.
Yeah. And so this is unlike the nominal essence. This isn't something that...
That's right.
...we construct. It is.
It just is as nature made it.
Right.
Existing independently of us.
Yeah. So for Locke, who was influenced by, corpuscularianism...
Yeah.
The idea that matter is made of these little particles. The real essence of gold would be the specific, arrangement of the particles.
Yeah, the size, shape, motion of those tiny little bits of matter that make up the gold.
And it's that gives rise to all the qualities that we observe.
That's right, yeah.
So it's kind of this fundamental division between how things truly are and how we as humans kind of
categorize.
Yeah, and understand them through our language.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this distinction really becomes important when he's critiquing.
It is
the dominant philosophical idea.
The scholastics, right?
Yes.
The Aristotelian.
Right.
Influenced.
So he's sort of echoing a distinction that was already
that's right
kind of in philosophy.
That's right, yeah.
Like real and nominal definitions.
Yeah, so the Aristotelian tradition also had this distinction between real definitions, which are supposed to capture the true essence of a species. So man is a rational animal.
Right.
And nominal definitions, which just identify members like man is a featherless biped.
Right. So, for Aristotle and his followers, a true science of nature had to be built on real definitions, not just nominal ones.
Yeah. And Locke agrees with that.
He does, yeah.
To an extent.
Yeah.
That we need knowledge of the essences.
Of essences, but...
He doesn't think that we can actually get real definitions of
substances.
Yeah, physical things.
Yeah. So he thinks that we can only have nominal definitions of substances, but we can have real definitions in morality and mathematics.
So that's where that distinction comes in again.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, so now the scholastics, they have this concept of substantial form.
Right.
So how does that fit into all this?
So the scholastic concept of substantial form was that, it was an imperceptible, immaterial essence that unites with matter to give it structure and to make it belong to a particular species.
Right.
And it's also responsible for,
It's kind of doing double duty.
It's kind double duty.
Right.
Yeah.
It's determining what species something belongs to.
Yeah. And causing all those properties.
And it's the reason why it has the properties.
So a lump of gold is gold because it's informed by the substantial form.
It's united with the substantial form of gold.
Right.
And then that form is what's responsible for all the properties we associate with gold.
Right. But Locke's really...
He's not buying it.
Yeah. He doesn't believe in those immaterial forms.
That's right.
And he really divides the labor.
He does.
He's like, okay, the real essence, which he equates with the arrangement of parts that causes...
Internal constitution is what causes.
The observable qualities.
Right.
But it's the nominal essence that determines what species it belongs to.
Right. So he's taking the substantial form and splitting it into two.
Right.
Yeah.
So real essence is about the underlying...
How.
The how, right.
How,
How the structure gives rise.
Causes.
Yeah, and nominal essence is about the what...
That's right.
What properties. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, and it seems like Locke is really using this to challenge the scholastic view.
He is.
Like how
it's pushing back on the scholastics.
Like how we determine what species
that's right,
things belong to.
And he has some pretty good arguments.
Yeah.
So
the scholastics, they thought that nature itself
that's right.
creates these species.
That's all built in.
Through these substantial forms. Yeah. And this is independent of
us.
Us naming them, right?
Right, yeah.
So if you knew everything about a thing, you could figure out what its substantial form was, and therefore you'd know
its species. Yeah.
So their idea of taxonomy was really about uncovering nature's classifications.
That's right. Yeah, nature's order.
Yeah, but Locke has a few arguments against this.
He does.
One of them is this idea of borderline cases.
Yeah.
Like monsters or changelings.
Yeah, so the idea is if everything with the same substantial form should have the same properties,
right? Yeah.
Then how do you explain these variations?
Right.
The monsters and the changelings,
right,
who don't fit neatly into our categories.
Right, and he really brings in like the corpuscularian perspective here and says, well, if you think about things being made of particles, you can have slight differences.
You can have variations.
In arrangements.
Yeah, at the micro level.
Yeah, which would explain
the differences we see.
Variations.
Yeah.
So what's another argument?
So another argument is that the general terms that we use and the abstract ideas, what we've been calling nominal essences are basically human constructs.
Right.
They don't exist out there in the world.
Right.
They come about through our process of abstraction.
Right.
And so he says, and I'll quote him again here.
Yeah.
He says, essences of the sorts or species of things are nothing else but these abstract ideas.
So the very notion of a species is something that...
It's our making.
Yeah.
That's right.
Not
nature's.
Yeah, pre-existing thing.
Right, yeah.
And his third argument is like this idea of, there's so many...
Nature makes so many things.
Similarities.
That are similar in various ways.
That we have to select. Yeah. Like, which ones?
And we decide what we're going to use to define species.
Yeah, and it's our decision, not nature.
Right. It's not written into the fabric of the universe.
Yeah. Yeah. And he makes this kind of bigger point about generality.
Yeah. So he thinks that generality only exists in our minds and in our language.
Right.
And
not out there in the world.
Yeah.
So we don't perceive these substantial forms. Yeah. We only have these nominal essences. As universals.
Right. The only universals are making.
Yeah. So while these are really persuasive, I think it's important to acknowledge that there are counter arguments.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
So you could argue that the substantial forms might still allow for variation. Yeah. Like it's just a blueprint.
Maybe it's a blueprint.
Right.
And the material itself can introduce some imperfections.
Yeah.
So it's not a perfect cookie cutter.
Right. And they might also say that,
these forms do influence our ideas.
Our ideas.
Yeah.
Right? Like we're not just
randomly.
Yeah, arbitrarily grouping things.
Things.
Like we are.
They inform our observations.
Yeah.
Right. And then we abstract from those observations.
Right.
But there's still a connection. There.
And then the whole generality point, they might say, well, you're kind of.
You're assuming...
Humanity was trying to prove...
assuming there are no substantial forms to show there are no substantial forms.
Right.
So it's kind of...
Yeah, so it's a good point.
Circular, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's possible that Locke, saw these arguments less as a demolition of scholasticism.
Right.
And more as
a challenge.
A challenge, right. Yeah. Look, if there were...
Maybe really how the world works.
Yeah.
We should see better evidence of it.
And we don't.
Yeah.
We've got these borderline cases. We can create these nominal essences.
Yeah.
In all sorts of different ways.
Yeah.
And we don't see these substantial forms.
Yeah, I'll see them.
Yeah.
Right.
So he's really shifting the focus away from these hidden essences.
To what we can observe.
Yeah, to the observable data.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about some of Locke's predecessors.
Yeah.
Who kind of influenced his thinking here.
Right.
So the term real essence, that's Locke's term.
Uh-huh.
But there were other people who were thinking about this.
Yeah, like Bacon and Boyle.
Yeah. And they were
using material structure.
Yeah.
To play the role of
both real and nominal essences.
Yeah, so they sort of combine those roles into one. So first let's talk about Bacon.
Okay.
So he was really influential.
Very influential, yeah.
In this whole shift away from Aristotelian thought.
That's right.
So what did he think?
Well, so he kind of redefined this Aristotelian concept of formal cause and linked it to the material structure of bodies.
Right.
And he also thought that the formal cause included laws of nature.
Right. So it's not just the stuff. It's the
rules
that govern the stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. So he actually talks about these forms as